Recording has begun. Good evening. This is the May 14, 2025 special meeting of the Compliance and Amendments Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force of the City and County of San Francisco. The time is 4:40 p.m. The Sunshine Ordinance Task Force and its committees convene in hybrid meetings that allow for either in-person attendance or remote participation. Public comment will be taken on each item of the agenda. Meeting decorum. Any member of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force or its committees may call for decorum due to the disorderly conduct of meeting participants. Persons who engage in threatening and/or menacing behavior may be asked to leave. Chair LaHood, that completes my announcements.
Okay, please call the first item.
Item 1, call to order, roll call, and agenda changes.
I don't think we have any agenda changes, so let's do roll call.
Taking the roll call on item 1. Chair LaHood.
Present.
Chair LaHood present. Member Wolf.
Present.
Member Wolf present. Member Anderson. Member Anderson absent. Member Pilpel.
Present.
Member Pilpel present. 1 absent. 3 present.
Okay, thank you. So just to please call the next item.
Public comment?
Public comment.
Public comment on item 1. We have one person in the online community. One moment, please. Hello, caller. If you'd like to make public comment on item 1, please raise your hand in the app or press *3 on your phone. Chair LaHood, we have no hands raised.
Okay, please call the next item.
Item number 2, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. Again, members of the community, if you'd like to make public comment on item 2, please raise your hand in the app or press *3. We have no one in the room and no hands raised.
Okay, let's call the next item, please.
Item number 3, hearing. Review of the Administrative Code, Sunshine Ordinance, Section 67, beginning with Chapter 67.26, and possible amendments to recommend to the full task force.
Okay, well, let's have a little discussion here. We had talked about whether we should continue going through the ordinance section by section, or maybe step back and talk about some sort of higher level points and big picture changes. I had asked Ms. Peterson to add some documents back into the attachments, and then adding some new ones that have come up recently over email or were submitted by Member Pilpel in hard copy. Some of those, let me go back to them and I can run in order. Obviously at the top is the running document with our notes and annotations. The one that comes after that, starting on page 29, is a very tiny email from Vice Chair Stein that had some recommendations. Then starting on page 30 was a summary of proposed changes submitted by Member Pilpel back in November. The following page is an email, very tiny, submitted actually by Mr. Sullivan with some recommendations, and we had some communication with him in recent months, and I wanted to include that. On page 32, we have a proposed letter. Actually, I did not write this. We should have annotated this. This was drafted by Member Pilpel as a suggestion to send out to city department heads. This has not been sent. On page 33, these were from a couple of years ago, general recommendations. This was before Member Anderson and Member Pilpel were on the task force, but had attended some meetings. And then the following document, I believe, and I apologize for not adding an index to this. I believe this was the document submitted by Allison Washburn that included some annotations, but I'm going to have to go back and check on that one. I think that's what that was. These were actually pulled from previous agenda attachments.
I think you're correct on that.
Okay, yeah, and I think the next several pages that are text of the ordinance are all pertain to that submission.
Yes.
And then if we keep going, many pages, and we get all the way to
56.
well beyond that, because I think
There's something buried.
let me see, page 56. I don't know what page you're on, because this all looks the same to me.
56 looks the same.
No. It's a different font. It starts at the beginning.
Right, but I think that she had submitted a couple of things.
Oh,
So I
okay.
think these are all
Different
related.
iterations.
Yes,
Okay.
there were different documents.
Got it. Okay.
And then we keep going. And then
Then
for the very end, on page 77, we had, at the very beginning of this process, we held a couple of meetings where members of the public made some suggestions, and we had a conversation, and this was a condensed summary of recommendations that came up, and those are the last 2 pages. So, members, my question to you is, would you like to discuss high-level ideas, or would you like to continue with our section-by-section editing? And we can do either today. Member Pilpel and then Member Wolf. But just because you're in the room, I'm not going to call on you first every time. No, I thought about this because I know Member Wolf, I can't see you, so we're going to alternate.
Is there a way to, if Member Wolf is unmuted, if he can just indicate when he's seeking recognition somehow?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Or
Or
I
you
might
should-
just call on him because I can't see him at all.
That's fine.
I usually make some strange noise or something.
But we feel you and we appreciate all that. Couple of introductory things and responding to Chair LaHood's query. First, on the agenda item in the future, let's be careful. It's chapter 67 beginning with section 67.26. So those two things got somehow reversed.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. I have no problem doing either. I would actually prefer that we do a little of both, maybe starting out high level and then going back to what we had been doing. And let me also say, I'm concerned about time and timing and timeline. I think at this point, given the pace that we've been at, I think it's highly unlikely to near impossible to get anything on the June 2026 ballot. And I think we're going to be challenged to get something ready, introduced, and on the November 2026 ballot. I'm not against it. I think we should, but I'm just saying I think time is of the essence. Is that okay? So I also think that there is value both in the line-by-line edits and the technical cleanup, as I would describe it, that we've been going through. But there's also different value to big concepts and getting some consensus both on this committee and at the full task force and more broadly in the community on the big picture pieces. And I think perhaps we've deferred that long enough, and we should frame some of those questions on the big picture to bring back to the full task force to get some discussion there. And I don't think that needs to lead to specific language at the full task force, but at least some direction / consensus there on some of the big pieces. So I'm trying to say yes to both.
Okay, thank you. Member Wolf?
So, okay, well, it's an interesting thought to hear from Member Pepala on the timeline. I don't have any necessarily comment on that at this point. There are two items that I brought up at the March and the May full task force meeting that that I want to enter into our queue.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do you want me to tell you what they are now?
Sure.
Oh, okay. The first one is to somehow define the role of an authorized representative, since now city government has more or less transformed itself into kind of a gatekeeping role of all sunshine requests coming through a public information office. Almost every department has one now. That when they send an authorized representative and not the actual person in question in the complaint, that they must have a level of knowledge of the complaint and the outcome, or it would be some sort of violation of the code.
Okay.
I think we run into enough frustration with many respondents not knowing enough, not having enough information, not knowing enough information. And it'd be better if the person who the complaint is directed to were to attend to answer the question more exquisitely. The second one is the one I brought up at just this month's meeting regarding something around enforcement around around trainings, that if there's some sort of like 6734 complaint, that somehow it be massaged into them being somewhat having violated the training, either not taking it seriously, not learning enough about it, and maybe the result there would be that they would have to go back and do the training again, kind of thing. Just so that there's some tangible response from us on a violator of the ordinance. Those are the two.
Okay. I have made note of these. Thank you. In fact, I think what I might do, if we're gonna, how about this? It is 4:53. How about from now until 5:30? Let's talk about high level changes. So things that are either changes that need to be made throughout the ordinance, or sort of philosophical shifts that we might want to think about, that might apply to different sections. Or we could also talk broadly about things that come up in multiple places, like the number of days that has been sort of inconsistent. In some cases it says business days, in some cases it says calendar days, or other places where there are technical references to technology. And if we want to think about making things like that consistent, would it be helpful to talk about that set of things for the next 35 minutes? And I will create a separate document with our list of that. And we might even go back to some of the previous lists that were created as, to give us some initial inspiration. What do you both think of that? I'm going to restate my proposal. For the next 35 minutes, I'd like for us to talk about high-level things. And I would say there's no one else in the room with us, but Administrator Peterson, perhaps maybe in 15 minutes, we could call and see if there's any public comment on what we've discussed so far, in case there's anyone who's inspired to weigh in.
We can do that.
Okay.
So at
5:10.
10 minutes after 5?
Yeah.
So Chair LaHood, I would say that's fine, but I guess I would limit my comments to not technical things or things that are throughout, but again, more the high level.
You are welcome to interpret
Yes.
this however you wish.
Okay. Happy, ready to go.
Okay. Okay. Who would like to jump in? How about this? I'm going to give each of you 5 minutes to start.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Does that sound good?
You want to take Member Wolf first?
Member Wolf, do you want to go first since we can't see you?
No, I don't want to go first.
Okay. Member Pilpel.
Okay. So I would just suggest, in no particular order, immediate disclosure requests,
What about them?
timing, process, who they need to be directed to.
Okay.
Powers and duties of the task force. Primarily as relates to Chapter 67. I mean, I'm not thinking about 12L right this second. What I'm saying. So that's general powers and duties. Separate item, handling of complaints.
Okay.
And that could be both meetings and records.
And when you say handling of complaints, do you mean by different departments or by the task force?
By the task force.
And forgive me, you said both A and B, and I missed those because.
Meetings and records.
Okay.
Because right now there's no parallel process to 21E for meeting issues. 21E is really about records.
Right.
Arguably the 30C powers go to everything, but anyway. Next would be enforcement of task force decisions.
Orders of determination.
Sure. And that relates to ethics, DA, AG, et cetera. Let me think what's next. As Member Wolf suggested, training, the training requirement generally and fine-tuning that, following up, if, either giving the task force more authority to order training or just reviewing what the whole goal of that training piece is.
Let me ask you a question. How do you feel about the task force itself required to take a training?
Wait, that we are required to take a training, or that we make a requirement for other people to take a training?
No, that we are required to take the training.
Well, I think it makes sense, especially for people who are new to the game.
Yeah. Sure. I just find it a little weird since we deal with it all the time.
I don't mind, and I like us and others taking training, but I think the training should be refreshed from time to time and should be tailored to the audience. I don't think every person related to the city needs the same type and level of training, but that's kind of a second level issue.
That's a good point.
Just a few more
Sure.
high level things. our relationship with the Ethics Commission generally. Is there still a need for us to be able to refer things to ethics to enforce? If that's not working and if they're not a useful partner, should they just be cut out? Essentially, should ethics just be the filing officer for training forms?
Okay, anything else?
Why don't I leave that as my first pass?
Okay.
Those were intended to be like high-level provocative topics.
Member Wolf, are you inspired?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything more than what I've contributed so far to contribute as far as big ticket items, really high level. I guess the only one is that I would really like to see a independent process for IDRs versus trying to fold it into 6721 and make it part of that. I think it is its own animal. I think that's was one thing that I was concerned about. The other two I gave you, let's see. Trying to see what I have on my list here. Give me a minute.
Okay.
While Member Wolf is considering, did you have some high-level thoughts?
What I'd like to do is not, I don't want to keep reinventing things. So I'd actually like to look at the, some of the lists that have already been compiled or submitted. For example, if we go down to page 77 and 78. So like, let's review these, given that, some of these, many of these came from members of the public. Many of them came from people who are involved in Sunshine, as past task force members, current task force members. And I think it would be helpful to look at these. In fact, I can read some of these into the record. So, referring to public records, explicitly prohibit the destruction of records with specific prohibition regarding destruction of text, emails, and other digital records within 2 years of their creation. I would agree that we need something on this, especially since we've had, experience of people reporting that there are no text messages when they don't exist because they are immediately deleted. Then there were recommendations, some of which, we may or may not be possible, because of technology. We think, oh, well, now we can keep everything, but there is some cost to storage. But, somebody had asked, could we explicitly prohibit the destruction of public records and provide for perpetual storage? And Member Wolf, maybe you have some thoughts on that, about the feasibility of that. Possibly requiring a universal minimum 1-year retention on all electronic public records, including emails, calendars, and text messages. Require, in fact, how about this? Let's start with this page 77, and let's, the three of us, go through these and pick up the ones that we think are, that we would agree with. And it's not to say that we're, just because we disagree, well, I would say if the three of us can agree on something, there's probably some, that's a good sign. Yeah. So if we look at the first three, because I feel like they're kind of related, about prohibiting destruction of public records, and with specifics about text, emails, digital records, does 2 years make sense? Does 1 year make sense? Would it be possible to have perpetual storage? Is there a certain list, maybe including emails, calendars, and text messages that need to be explicitly stated in the ordinance?
Well, I would proffer this, is that the standard for general business is 8 years.
When you say the standard, whose standard?
like, if you're a business, your IRS records, any of your, business, kind of accounting and whatnot, is generally about 8 years. And then you could start destroying after 8 years. But considering that we're in the electronic age and everything is now moving, electronically, there shouldn't be any issue with having to destroy anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other big issue is backups.
Mm-hmm.
And we've run into these issues. There was the George, what's his last name? Rec and Park, George
Wooding.
George Wooding versus Rec and Park, where somehow they didn't have emails, but the other party that was part of it actually had the emails.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then there was an order to retrieve them from backups, which they were able to. So there are issues like that. So I would say that, to the ability of the city, as far as cost and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
Hard drive costs are fairly cheap these days. I would say that I think having, the penultimate in perpetual backups and retention should be possible.
Okay, if you were to, if you had the power to design this system right now, what would you require of all city departments?
I think a lot of it, what I would require is that first of all, I think it should follow something like the index of records, so
Mhm.
that whatever records are able to be automatically made public,
Mhm.
that it's easy for the public to navigate and to search for.
Mhm.
I don't believe they need to build any new systems.
Mhm.
I think the system's already in place. They may just need to add more storage, which just means more hard drives kind of thing. But I think it's the organization of what is of the documents, and and that they're available. If more of it was made available to the public, I think there'd be less interaction with city staff.
Mhm.
And unless they don't find something there, then they can ask, file a request. And if the request is, denied or delayed or whatever, then you got the complaint process here.
Okay, what about texts, emails, and, in what we might call internal communication, either among city staff or between, among staff and elected officials?
Well, I don't want to sound like Big Brother here, but I think all of that needs to be collected in a repository of some sort. It could be that the problem is people will do things. They'll do things to get around, to find a workaround anyway.
Mhm.
So even if they have a city issued phone or electronic device, and it only allowed certain applications to be installed,
Mhm.
like let's say it wouldn't allow Signal to be installed, kind of thing. There's no, you can't tell what's happening if they're using their personal phone,
Mhm.
except that now you have the requirement of revealing city business on personal electronic accounts.
Right.
So, I think it's something around there, but I think making it too tight will be rejected
Mhm.
in some way. I think there's a way, like things that are very obvious, like the Signal app kind of thing. I think that's fairly obvious, should not be on government issued devices. in the same way, I think that they limit the amount of Google access on certain networks in the city, for reasons of security, and other websites or other network access. I'm not sure. But I don't know. I think if we're trying to encapsulate the ability to access certain kinds of information, be able to access certain applications that would prevent retention, then I think that should be curbed.
Okay.
Okay, so in theory, let's talk about the technology that.
Well, may I? And it's 15 minutes.
Yes, one member, Administrator Peterson, maybe we should call for public comment.
The committee is taking public comment every 15 minutes on item 3, hearing review of administrative code.
And then I have some
Members of the online community, if you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand in the app or press star 3. Charlotte, we have one hand raised.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sullivan.
Hello, caller. You've been
Sullivan.
muted. Hello.
Sullivan, let me know when to go.
Hello.
3 minutes.
Sullivan,
Hello.
did you hear me?
We hear you. Would you hold on a moment? We're going to give you 3 minutes. Your time begins now.
Okay, so I'm going to try and cover a lot of things. So as far as the immediate disclosures, I think that should go to the department heads. Section 6729-7 at the end, they're responsible for shall disclose such records in accordance with this ordinance. That's for immediate disclosure response. Immediate disclosure responses B, C, D apply to all requests, not just immediate disclosure requests. All language to ethics should remain the same. We do not know what will happen in the future. Courts may order that the language be followed. Okay, government retention of records. Boy, I'm into this right now. They're destroying records right in front of me. I agree with all of what Bruce Wolf said. Is currently set by departments for documents that aren't like financial and stuff, and departments are destroying at 2 to 5 years rate, depending on the department. Next request, the IT department just recently deleted a whole bunch of next requests from Public Works and Department of Health, probably by their request, including up to 2023, so that you can't count backwards. Public Works has a 5-year retention record, so I don't know why they deleted. Next request can't be searched by major engines, and search major search engines, and its search function is really terrible. It's like you can only use like one keyword, and you just have to hope that the request has it or the document title has it in it. So it basically, you're lucky if it comes up and you have to really do another next request just to make sure you get the right documents. But right now, the retention, I don't think any of them are following that. That's in Section 8.1 of the Administrative Code. Section 8.7, prerequisite to destruction of records, sale in lieu of destruction. They have to offer it to the library. They have to offer it to a historical society, and they have to offer it up for sale to anyone or selling. Before destroying the records. But I agree with Bruce Wolf. They can just add capacity, and there's no reason why they should be destroying records right now. Okay, that's it, I guess. Hope you got all that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Is there anyone else wishing to make public comment at this time? And we will take another break again in 15 minutes and call for public comment.
Anyone else wishing to make public comment on item 3, please raise your hand in the app or press star 3. We have no other hands raised.
Okay, there were some interesting comments in there and some interesting details, especially the part about having to offer records to the library and offer them for sale before destroying them, which is sort of an interesting point. But getting back to what we were saying specifically about actually, Member Pillwell, can I say one thing that I will hand it to you? Because Member Wolf was talking about, I think as a baseline, I think it would be good to have, I liked what Member Wolf said about requiring city departments following the index of records, whatever records can automatically be made public, it should be made public and easy to search. I think that also gets at what Mr. Sullivan was saying regarding next requests and not being able to find information. In terms of emails, text messages, and other digital records, I know we can't fully control what people are doing on their own devices, but my guess is a great deal of work is being done on city devices. And I think that if we had that central collection of communications on city emails, text messages sent on city phones, and just having it be very clear that that information is being captured and saved for X amount of years, whether it's 2 years or whatever, and that's being saved centrally. And then if somebody makes a records request and also asks for a review of personal devices, that those who are asked will have to do that review, because we know that communication is going to happen beyond city devices just because of how we know people deal with communication. But Member Pilpel, you wanted to add something.
A number of thoughts. I'm prepared to deal with the entire ordinance and all kinds of issues tonight. I really would prefer not to spend the entire session today just discussing these three bullets. But I did want to comment on these and some of Member Wolf's comments, perhaps touching on Mr. Sullivan's thoughts as well. I believe Member Wolf referred to the index of records, which is in the ordinance, 67.29. That was a concept that was advanced as part of Proposition G. It's not part of state law. It's not elsewhere in local law. The way it was implemented largely mirrors what departments already produce for their record retention policy and schedule pursuant to provisions of Chapter 8 of the Administrative Code, which Mr. Sullivan made appropriate reference to. So despite, and the task force has no current role in reviewing, approving, or otherwise dealing with those record retention policies and schedules. Perhaps we could have a role in that. That would be an amendment to not Chapter 67, but again, elements of Chapter 8. Despite Member Wolf's assertion that businesses have an 8-year basic retention period, which may well be true or may vary depending on the business and the type of record and all that. The state law basic requirement that I understand is a 2-year retention period for records as defined, or greater depending on the specifics of the record. So it's, in some cases, a basic email that has no other value would presumably have a 2-year retention period. And again, other records vary, and each department maintains, updates its own record retention policy and schedule. In terms of the practicality of all of this, although storage may be cheaper, management of that record keeping is not at all cheap or simple, whether it's electronic, paper records, or other, as we've learned through cases and just the general operations of the world. I would suggest, among other ways to slice that, is you have some amount of paper records, some amount of records that are electronic and kept on a hard drive, either on a local computer or on a network, some amount of email, some amount of documents or records that are maintained in a system in the cloud, some similar things that are elsewhere, not in the cloud in a storage way, but in, remember, Wolf, help me, is it called SaaS, software as a service?
Yeah.
Can be. Okay. So it could be in some, it could be buried in some third-party app, is the point, in some proprietary or non-proprietary system that keeps or deletes stuff whenever it feels like it. And it's not like the city can necessarily provide a retention period. And then there are personal devices and other ways to store things. So my point is that there's not one single way that things are kept like in a physical file cabinet like 50 years ago. There's still some of those records, but that's not nearly all of it. And as an example, for email, we may say we may want, there may be required a 2-year retention period. We may want a longer retention period. We may want those to be kept forever. But when someone leaves the city, my understanding is that their email account is supposed to be reviewed, becomes the property of the department that they worked for, and may be kept for those things that someone cares about, and may be flushed for everything else. And to suggest that and I'm not saying that Member Wolf is suggesting this, but I'm saying the idea that every email account used by any person in the city is going to be kept open forever because there may be some email there that somebody might ask for in the future seems infinitely burdensome and costly to me without a corresponding public benefit. I'm not saying don't keep any email. I'm saying there needs to be a lot more selectivity about all of this.
You know, it's funny, as someone who is very bad about organizing email, it's actually easier to keep everything than to be selective.
Understood, but again, my understanding of state law, city government practice is not to retain everything because the burden just continues to grow as records are created. There's more burden to maintain, and it's not like the resources or the staff increase to manage that. You just have more and more stuff, and whether it's physical boxes or electronic data or some combination, it's just more and more. And, you know, just as in life, you periodically move and purge and don't keep everything, arguably so too should government periodically move and reorganize and purge some.
I guess
Not all.
honestly, I would argue that I understand that for physical objects, but
Okay.
I think digital files, it's actually easier to keep everything as long as storage capacity is not an issue, and that it is organized in some fashion. At minimum, we know who created it and when. That's relatively easy to keep track of. Remember?
I have a little bit different thought about this, not in necessarily opposition of it. It just said practicality. You know, before the internet, we had Iron Mountain, and anytime you needed a record, you know, folks had to go down there and search through, you know, boxes and boxes of files to get your document. Now, I don't know how much there was, I thought, some plan to digitize all of that so they can, you know, get rid of all the paper and stop using the Iron Mountain storage. I don't know what the status is of that. I think that would be an important piece of information for us with regards to retention. And if they have been able to digitize enough information going back, I I think that anything that's happening electronically is, it's below pennies on the dollar now to do stuff, and the maintenance of it is very automated. The key thing about this is redundancy, and this is a security issue with regards to that information. We don't want what was it, what was that famous library in Greece that burned down?
No, you mean
Alexandria?
no, Alexandria in Egypt.
Yeah, that, we don't want that kind of thing to happen and we lose all our records. So redundancy is really important. So you need backups of backups in different locations, and they can't be local. It has to be networked in order for things like that to happen. So, I would go as far as to, assure that records are retained with a certain level of redundancy that could withstand like a disaster, a fire, an EMP attack, things like that, that kind of thing. And it may be that from time to time, certain hard drives are taken offline and put on a shelf so that they won't be affected because they have electricity attached to them. They're charged in some kind of way. I mean, those are more IT level concerns, but I think that might also be a catalyst for us to work with DT in order to figure out if they have some sort of disaster plan for city records and what that is or what it might be.
Okay. Chair LaHood,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm noting that we're up against time again. Just
I have one announcement after that, a real quick announcement.
Okay.
Again, I don't want to do this all night. What I would try to summarize on this issue is to bring to the full task force the question of should the task force or the ordinance more directly address record retention?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, are there certain types of records that should have a specific minimum retention time? And, flowing from that is what are the practical implications, costs, benefits, implementation steps on that. I don't pretend to know all the answers. I'm open to different ways to look at it, but I think it's far too simplistic to suggest that the three of us here can just say keep everything forever and it doesn't cost much and just do it. Sorry.
Member Wolf, you said you have an announcement.
Yeah, just real quick. I got a message from the Ethics Commission about an upcoming special meeting. They call it an interested persons meeting to discuss improvements of the Ethics Commission's enforcement regulations.
Huh.
And one of the items is titled Clarifying Matters Related to Enforcement of Referrals under the Sunshine Ordinance, Section 11 amended.
And when is this happening?
There are two meetings. One is May 27th. The other one is May 29th.
Okay.
And I'll forward this to you, Pat.
Thank you.
That would be great. Member Wolf, thank you. That's very interesting. And perhaps we should discuss with Chair Yankee some presence there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
I attempted to attend their meeting last Friday, which got canceled at the last minute.
Okay. So here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to give it 5 more. Well, I'm going to give it 5 more minutes, and then let's open for public comment because I feel like for the last 10 minutes we were continuing our previous discussion. So let me go to back to that bullet list, looking at the next set. So other recommendations regarding public records require searchable logs of meetings attended by elected officials and department heads, strengthening calendar keeping and disclosure requirements. Do you have any thoughts on calendar requirements do you like this, or do you have other calendar requirements that you would note?
If you're asking me before Member Wolf,
Sure, on this one, and then I'll ask Member Wolf on the next one.
I think I may have some technical tweaks to 29-5 on the calendar requirement, but I don't have a fundamental disagreement with how that's structured. One could argue that those, if you will, Prop G or public calendars could be posted on the department's website and, kept there for some period of time, whether it's a week or 2 years or whatever. I'm not sure that requiring creation of an additional searchable log has huge public benefit. I would need to understand more what the goal is here.
Member Wolf?
Clarification for persons wishing to make public comment.
Yes.
We're going to explore that in approximately another 5 minutes.
Yeah, another
after
3
this
minutes.
line of after this line of questioning is completed. Okay, thank you.
Member Wolf?
I don't have much necessarily to say on that right now.
Okay. And
What are your thoughts?
my thoughts are, in some ways, I think what Member Pilpel said, that it's clear what is required. I think that we need perhaps more education and verification that departments are doing what is required. And I would say that we've seen improvement over the past couple of years, perhaps because records have been requested and departments have come before the full task force and then subsequently complied because there were people out there who are making these requests. And at the end of the day, it's easier to figure out how to do it and comply than keep coming before the task force because there are complaints. Requiring searchable logs of meetings attended. This is interesting, but does require additional work. I think I would prefer to see stronger compliance. And Member Wolf, were you the one who said perhaps they should just be automatically posted on a website? That could be useful.
It kind of was the idea around the index of records. That at least they would put like maybe some headings of very categorical areas of records that were available. So that way it gives some guidance to the public to kind of self-facilitate, kind of gives them kind of a mini library, so to speak, of knowing what records might be available. So one of our biggest complaint we get from the staff side is how much time Sunshine takes to implement. So the more that we can make things, self-serving to the public, reduces the amount of time it would be for staff.
I think you mean self-service rather than self-service.
Yes, self-service. Self-service.
Let me just say one other thing, and
Sure.
again, mindful of time. I think the calendar requirement now applies to department heads and elected officials. There are different types of actors there. So if you think of the mayor goes out most days and has press events all over town for whatever reason, and also has meetings at City Hall and may have meetings or events elsewhere. Tracking some of that may be of value to various folks for various reasons. Okay. Same thing with other elected officials. Department heads, on the other hand, arguably are running departments and may have internal staff meetings, may be meeting with lobbyists about projects on occasion, maybe, running off to a meeting at a regional agency or dealing with a regulatory matter or personnel matter, all kinds of different things. We've sort of lumped all of this into the, calendar requirement as being an element of transparency, which it is, but again, they're different actors, and it's not all the same. I'm just.
I hear
Okay.
the commentary that it's.
I'm not
interesting-
anti.
No,
but I'm just,
it's an interesting point and something that we can put out there.
What do you mean by different actors?
I'm saying
If it's not, if we're talking about elected officials and department heads, who are the other actors?
They are the actors, but I'm saying that they are different in type. So, Supervisor so-and-so's calendar throughout the day is going to be different because they're meetings with constituents and city staff and preparing for meetings and whatnot from a department head. The what does Phil Ginsburg do all day is different from what did Supervisor Peskin do all day.
Yeah, but whatever they're doing in the course of what they're being paid for is of public interest.
Understood, but all I'm suggesting is that any new or expanded or different requirement has a burden or a cost associated with it, and I'm interested in doing things or adding burdens that have a more discernible benefit rather than just everybody can maintain an annotated calendar for a long time.
For me, I'm sorry, you're going to have to give me a little more kind of details to what additional cost or labor would be involved for that.
Well, it depends on what the requirement is, I'm sure.
But it's a very broad, it's a very general statement.
We have had complaints about the mayor's chief of staff not having to disclose keep and maintain and disclose a public calendar.
But that's a different question. That's a definition of whether the chief of staff is actually the department head of the office.
Right, and the chief of staff is not a department head; it's the chief of staff. The point is that adding anyone to that group or requiring more specificity in the calendar disclosures is an additional burden. We could have a small army of people doing various things to create more logs, to create more specificity, and there's just a cost to that. I'm not against doing things that cost. I'm just saying let's look for the benefit.
Okay,
I didn't want to argue this.
We're done on this. I'm not actually hearing anything new at this point.
Yeah.
Administrator Peterson, why don't we take public comment on this? And then when we're done with public comment, I want to give us a solid 15 minutes to keep talking.
The committee is taking intermittent public comment on item 3. Anyone wishing to make public comment, please raise your hand in the app or press star 3. We have no one in the room. Chair LaHood, we have one hand raised.
Okay, let's give the person 3 minutes.
Hello,
Sullivan.
Mr. Sullivan? Yes, your 3 minutes begins now.
So on record retention, it's going to get easier with AI. As far as, I think it's like Mr. Wolf says, it's pretty easy now, but digitalize things. So in Section 8, they have 3 category classifications of records, and they have permanent records, and they are trying to move it all to optical imaging storage or digital. And if you read the California retention records things, it is 2 years, but it is all dealing with like paper. So the one thing I would say about retention of records, it should be, if anything of value is being talked about or exchanged where there might be an occurrence of fraud, that should be saved longer. If it's just something that's not of value, then it's not going to be worth saving for very long. And then let's see, I think I might have had one thing. If you, it would be great if you guys added retention records in the Sunshine Ordinance, but it would add a lot more load to what you do. Because right now, like I said, the only reason why I'm not really at Sunshine Ordinance is because I'm dealing with record retention. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, I am going to go to the, yes.
We have no other hands raised.
Thank you, thank you. I assumed that, but I shouldn't have assumed because there may have been more people entering the online chat or online meeting. Okay, next bullet point here, we have designate and fund a citywide records manager who could work with the city archivist and also coordinate records managers in each city department.
I think that goes to what we were discussing before. I think it's a great
specifically,
idea. Well, with regards to retention and making sure that they're organized, creating something self-service, I think it's a worthwhile expenditure.
I agree, but I think, again, with the first three bullets, this one and I think the next couple here, that this really gets to the broad question of what relationship should the ordinance and the task force have with records management. Right now, we deal with records disclosure. And to a very small extent with 29-7, transition of officials and kind of a broad policy statement. But
well, it's not the task force, though. We're talking about the ordinance.
I'm saying neither the task force nor the ordinance gets into a lot of records management.
however, the questions and complaints that are brought to us come to us because of records management issues, which I think means that the ordinance should refer more to records management and the mechanics of it, because clearly there are cases where it's not being managed well, and that's why the complaints are coming in.
No disagreement. So again, I'm just trying to raise the level of dialogue. I think the question to put to the task force is, should the task force have involvement, and should the ordinance be more specific about records management practices of the city, including what's in Chapter 8?
I got a comment.
Member Wolf.
So one thing flag that it raises for me is many times people will try to find ways that will trump the ordinance. And I think this kind of thing, though, should be somewhat global and more permanent, and should be contained maybe in the charter and not in the code, so that it is clearly defined for all branches of government, and then it trickles down, and there's no question. It's the law.
Okay. So it sounds like we have, I'm not going to say agreement, but there's some degree of agreement that things need to be changed. And among us, we have different ideas about where that change should be codified. Is that correct? Is that a?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to say, yeah, I'll say what, let's bring this question to the full task force. I think this is a good question to ask, that we do need to do something about, or something needs to be done about records management. Should it be done by the task force or other powers? Yep.
Can I'm happy to go through the rest of these, but can I just step back for a second for a minute or so?
Literally, or you want to bring up something else?
It's an expression. I want to, I think for me, at this point, there are kind of three broad areas that I see in a rewrite. One is what I would call the technical language, kind of the line-by-line edits that we were doing to improve the readability, to, reduce the amount of ambiguity, to track more with state law where that makes sense, to differentiate from state law where that makes sense, but just to, kind of technical edits. That's one. Two is to provide for an amendment process to the ordinance, whether it's the two-thirds model like the
I'm going
Ethics
to restart that
Commission.
again. Just start point 2 from the beginning.
Point 2 is an amendment process for the ordinance, whether it's two-thirds of the members of the task force and two-thirds of the members of the board in print for 30 days with findings, essentially the similar process to ethics, or something else, but that there ought to be some way to amend the ordinance without going back to the voters. That's 2 for me. And the third is to specifically strengthen, hopefully not weaken, but to specifically strengthen provisions of the ordinance that might have a cost or other implications that would sell the amendment to the voters. There are a lot of little bits here, but so far I haven't really heard some overwhelming, huge reason to vote for this if I were a general member of the public, particularly if it's got some huge cost determined by the controller. If we could say, for all of these changes, the board will be able to amend it, not easily, but they will. The public benefit is fill in the blank. The cost is something, may not be zero, might be zero, I don't know. But what you get out of this is up to date with technology, online public meetings, faster access to records, whatever the big sales pitch is, something that the average person can say, yeah, that strengthens it, I'm with that. And given all the other, state and federal and local funding cuts and programs and problems of the day, I'm still with doing that. Because otherwise, I think it's an uphill climb.
Okay, I'm going to say sure, yes, but frankly, I don't think that's what's coming out of this committee. I think that's going to come out of the full task force, and I think we need to set the task force up for success with this by going through the minutia. Because if we don't go through the minutia, we're not going to know what we're like. We can put a banner on all of this, but if what is underneath it does not sync up, it's going to take us not 12 months or 18 months, but it's going to take us 4 more years.
Right. Understood. And I think that was my point, that some of these specific provisions, we can argue about. Departments, if we had them here, would argue about them, and there could be a meeting of the minds, but I'm not sure that the general public, by way of a ballot measure, is so concerned about that. I don't know how many people really care about 2 years versus 3 years versus 5 or 10 years.
So here's the thing. We have limited time in these meetings.
Understood.
And I thank you for bringing these up. These are good points, but I think we can get more done if we can go through some of the specifics.
Then let's go on,
Okay.
move on. That's fine.
Okay. I think everybody agrees about systematically digitizing records. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Do I have no opposition to that?
I don't oppose it. I'm just not sure if it should be in the ordinance.
This is not even specifically about what's in the ordinance. This is about looking for.
I mean, if we want,
David, we could argue about process for years. I'd like to not argue about process. I'd like to figure out what our asks are, and then let's figure out what the asks are, which asks make sense. Then we can go to which asks should be in the ordinance or shouldn't be in the ordinance. Like there's going to be, what we're going to do is several layers of sorting. Right now, I'm trying to sort the little pieces to see if the little pieces make sense. If they don't make sense, I don't even want to include them.
okay.
But if they make sense, then let's put them in buckets and then let's see which buckets belong with the ordinance, and then work from there. My fear is if we just come up, if we just come up with three high level, this is what the ordinance should do, then tell me who's going to do that work.
Okay.
I mean,
are you asking me, or are you just
okay.
saying?
What I'm saying is, if we are not doing the work here, who is going to do the work?
I'm sorry. You lost me. Doing what work?
If we are not going through the ordinance and figuring out what needs to be changed,
right,
who is going to do that work?
I think we are doing that work. I think that's what we had been doing at this committee for the last number of months.
Okay. Are you asking to do something different?
I am asking or suggesting that we do two different things, that we continue to do those what I would call technical edits, which I think have value, and I'm suggesting that we cluster or frame some of these larger policy questions to bring to the task force to get some direction, so that we do both and we do more of it and do it sooner, or we're never going to get to a ballot measure.
Okay, I think that's what we're doing, so
Okay.
I don't understand what you were opposing. I was sensing that you were saying, I don't like how we're handling this. So if you don't like how we're handling this, how would you like to do things differently?
I was trying to come up today with a few things, whether they're my things or whoever's things, that we could bring to the full task force and say, how does the task force think we should attempt to resolve these difficult questions? Just give us a little direction.
Here's what I'm doing. Instead of just taking the 5 things that you mentioned at the top of the meeting and assuming that those are the things we should use, I wanted to go back to the notes and the synthesized information that we had from previous meetings with several members of the public who contributed valuable information, and to review those and see which of those might be elevated to this level. That's what I was doing. Okay.
And I guess part of what I'm saying is I think some of these things can be clustered. I think that there's several of the items that we talked about are all related to records management.
What I want to do is to articulate them. I just want to articulate them and know which ones we're discarding and which ones we're agreeing with. That's why I'm going through them systematically.
Okay. Let's keep going.
Okay. Member Wolf.
I got nothing to add.
Okay. So I was just reading, the reason I read the point systematically digitized was because I thought we generally agreed on this. I didn't mean it to become a point of departure where we had to, argue about what we were doing. Okay, and we've already talked about, and maybe this is the bigger question about making requirements for departments regarding retention policies. That ties into the previous discussion about what should be part of the ordinance or not part of the ordinance. I'm just trying to be systematic so we don't gloss past these things. That's all I'm trying to do.
So again, not disagreeing, but as an example on that point, it refers to retention policies and schedules and website redesigns. So currently, retention policies and schedules are under Chapter 8, don't involve the task force. Website redesigns, however, are referenced in 29-2, and arguably could be written a little differently, but could have a more specific role for the task force, and that wouldn't be as far afield.
Okay. Okay.
And for what it's worth, there are little nuggets buried in 67.29-2 about making as much information available on public websites as makes sense. And that goes to some of what Member Wolf commented on earlier.
Right.
So the pieces do actually tie together.
Yeah. The next one is about, I mean, let's do, in fact, I'm going to do the next three and then we'll take public comment. Requiring the city attorney to nominate an outside independent attorney as supervisor of records with approval by the Board of Supervisors. I feel like this is an old version of something that has come up in our discussions going through the ordinance. We were talking about, you know, what does supervisor of records even mean?
Yeah.
And without going back in great detail to what we've said before, how would you two, is there a way you would synthesize? Actually, you know what? I might even be able to find this.
I can rewrite that. I have language for you.
Okay, I think we might already have this actually.
I can just give you a sentence.
Hang on, before you even do that.
Okay.
I mean, we've said before, just supervisor of records shall mean city attorney, and our notes on this was this may need to be changed pending discussion. Does this role still make sense?
Right.
And so just generally review the role of supervisor of records, what that should mean and who that should be. Yes?
Something like that. I think I would put it to the full task force as, should the supervisor of records role be retained, deleted, or modified? And what should the function, and if so, what should the function be, and who should perform it?
Member Wolf?
Yep, no comment.
Okay.
And there should be a variety of opinions. I'm not suggesting there's an easy answer to that.
This one, require incremental response for all records requests that cannot be fulfilled immediately. It seems that has often been our interpretation, but there's been concern that it's not explicit enough in the ordinance. Do we agree on that?
Yes.
That I would agree, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and I think we fixed that. And if not,
Yes.
that's a
that
relatively...
we should fix that.
I think we already did in the rewrite, and I think that's a relatively simple fix.
Okay.
Implementing it may be more complicated.
I was going to say, I
but
don't
the
think it's
language,
been done, but you said we've discussed it. Yeah.
and I don't think there was dispute about that.
Yeah.
If it takes you 2 years to pull stuff, you shouldn't wait until 2 years to disclose it.
Right. Okay.
The two relevant words are rolling basis, not if requested, but in all cases, produce records on a rolling basis.
Yeah.
Period.
This one about creating a financial penalty for indefinitely delaying access to public records. I think that we would have a hard time making this happen, but maybe this points to Member Wolf's recent recommendation of requiring additional training. How do you two feel that we should continue to include this recommendation about a fee, or lean more on the idea of, if compliance continues to be delayed, that there should be requirements for additional training for however many people that needs to include?
If I may, first, I would say this goes to the larger question of enforcement generally and where those powers and duties are. I would, at this point, I am not at all interested in imposing fees on individuals or departments and fee recovery and fines and penalties and all that. I'm open to whether people should be fired or disciplined or dismissed, whatever, note to the file, hall of shame, whatever. I am with the idea that if an individual can be shown to have not properly discharged their duties, or their department didn't, that they should have to take further training. That training could be customized to them or the problem that we're trying to address. and they should have to do that on their own time. Maybe the city person who designs the training gets paid to do that, but the person who has to take it, did I mention, on their own time. That might be an incentive to, not end up in that place for those people. You really want to spend your weekend, 2 or 4 hours on, having to read past orders of determination from the last 20 years of the task force, and
Probably not.
and there'll be a quiz.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Member Wolf, any?
I guess, this is an interesting subject because the way the ordinance is written, it expects the person who has possession of, let's say we're talking about records, who has possession of the records or the information to be the respondent, okay? Not a proxy, not the public information officer as a proxy. So it begs the question of the person requiring to have knowledge of the ordinance and their responsibility for it as a city staffer that may not be required to take the training. So that's my first point on that. I'm just leaving that as a concept, as a statement to be open for discussion. But the other question I have is then, PIO versus the actual person. Having a PIO feels more like we're operating under the CPRA, because the CPRA does not require a specific person to be a respondent. It requires the agency to be the respondent as a whole. So the ordinance being allowed to enhance the CPRA has, magnified it down to the actual person who may actually, in fact, have the actual record. Now, bringing that back to a gatekeeper feels to me a little like it's counter to what the sentiment of the ordinance is trying to bring to the public.
If I may on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think this is actually a really important discussion point. I think Member Wolf is correct that the CPRA structure is about agencies and accountability at the agency level. And I think the custodian of a public record concept in Sunshine is different and suggests that individuals somehow have that responsibility. And I guess my sense over the last 25 years is that the Sunshine concept, as it's currently being worked, doesn't really work. That I just don't think you can hold accountable an individual, whether they're authorized or knowledgeable or all or part or any of that, for providing somebody, either their records or somebody else's records in a system of record keeping and records management that they don't necessarily, that they probably didn't design or control. And I just think that those two models are fundamentally at odds. And I would resolve that to the CPRA model, and more specifically hold departments and department heads accountable for having a system in place, generally, and specifically delivering records and, as appropriate, meetings that comply with the law. We've talked before about how unrealistic and unworkable it is to hand an IDR to a nurse or a bus driver and expect that they're going to, somehow produce public health or MTA records. And just as agencies get sued for failure to do various things, it's ultimately the head of that agency that decides with legal counsel how to respond, and it's the agency that's accountable. It's not the low-level planner or the bus driver or the nurse or the whoever. It's the head of that agency, and that's what comes with being a department head.
Yeah, these are good points. Member Wolf, how do you feel about the, if we look at, 25 years of the Sunshine Ordinance attempting to hold individuals responsible versus the CPRA model, do you think the experiment has run its course, or do you think it just needs to be tweaked?
Oh no, I think it just needs to be tweaked. I think what we're doing here is of great value to the world. I mean,
oh no. When I say run its course, I mean, do you agree with what Member Pilpel is suggesting, that responsibility should be shifted to departments and department heads, or do you think it should remain with individuals?
No, it should remain with individuals, but ultimately, if the individual does not act and violates, that the onus is still on the department head as it's currently written to make sure that their department is operating within compliance of the ordinance. It's the boss's responsibility to make sure that the employees are following and being responsible to the law. And if they aren't, and it puts the department in jeopardy, thus the department head in jeopardy, then, if the department head doesn't want to be in jeopardy, then they should make sure that everything is operating in compliance. I mean, that was the hope. You would think that the way the ordinance was written, that would happen. And, fortunately, we've run into different issues around that.
So here's the interesting thing, and I will give it back to you.
I'm just not sure if you can do both.
Here's the funny thing. When I hear both of you talk, even though it may sound like you're saying opposite things, I don't actually think you're that far apart. Perhaps the only difference is Member Wolf would like people to, members of the public still, to be able to ask anyone for a record.
Okay.
But if they don't comply, the burden is on the department and the department head. Member Pilpel, it sounds like, would rather have a central intake system that doesn't necessarily involve the individual until that central coordinator goes to them and says, hey, somebody asked for this.
I'm not quite sure that that's happening.
Oh, no, right, because it's not designed that way at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
I think they can be reconciled. I don't think that, I agree that we're not necessarily, worlds apart here. And some of it has to do with the practicality of, handing a note to a bus driver versus next request versus sending an email, whatever. And And some of it has to do with the increased formality that's existed in the last period of years. You know, in the old days, or in what would you term it? Common parlance, or the way people interact. You know, if I run into some person and it becomes known that they have a document that I'm interested in, I may say, hey, you've got a copy of that. Can I get a copy of that? And if that person has no reason to withhold it, they would say, sure, I've got 5 of them. I have extras. Here, enjoy. Take care, right? If you have any questions, give me a call, right? And that's really informal, and that's fine, right? When we get it to the level of, no, you've got to go through next request, and you have to be very specific, and then we'll give you a form letter, and within a day or within 10 days, and then we're going to have to go search for records and blah, blah, blah. We create these layers of formality that sometimes yields good records and timely reply, and sometimes doesn't. Results may vary.
Mm-hmm. Administrator Peterson, I'm thinking let's call for public comment again.
Members of the public, the committee is taking intermittent public comment on item 3, review of administrative code. If you'd like to make public comment, please raise your hand in the app or press *3. We have one person wishing to make public comment.
Okay, great.
Sullivan.
Hello,
Sullivan.
Mr. Sullivan. Hello, you have 3 minutes.
Well, I have a lot to say. Do I start now?
Yes, your time begins now.
Okay. All right. So on record retention, section 6721-1 policy regarding use and purchase of computer systems. There's a lot that could be used for record retention there. And the departments that use computer systems to collect and store public records shall program and design these systems to ensure convenient, efficient, and economical public access to records, and shall make the public records easily accessible over public networks such as an internet. I can't read the whole thing right now, but I want to say that I tried to bring to IT, I put a Sunshine Ordinance thing on this about next request and IT's use of it, and I lost because it also asks for, that it can be a major search engine to search it and stuff like that. But anyway, on supervisors of records, I would keep that. Right now, supervisors of records seem to be working a little bit better. Every time I put in a record, at least they say they got it and they're going to get back to me. This all has to do with record retention. On the state, it's not just agency; it's also officer is used. So like section 7921.505A, as used in this section, agency includes a member, agent, officer, or employee of the agency acting within the scope of that membership, agency, office, or employment. So it's not just the specific agency that can be held accountable. It can also be the person. And they also, in the Brown Act, there's also things about that. And as far as delay of records, when they delay records, it's political. And I remember a Sunshine thing where they delayed records for some sort of budget process. And this reporter wanted to get these records, and he didn't get it in time for the budget thing. And so when the public's not informed about everything, one of the things is that I would say action is that it delays the action.
30
If
seconds.
everyone doesn't have all the same information, then it's not fair. And I do agree with the department heads to be held accountable for public records requests. It says it basically, and if they're not, they can be held as willful. And I guess that's it. That's a lot of ground to cover, but.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. We're going to keep giving you chances to weigh in on this.
I want to comment on that a little bit.
Hang on 1 second. Hang on. Forgive me.
We have another
Public comment?
person.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we have another public comment.
Great.
Hello, caller, do you wish to make public comment on item 3?
Yes, I do. Confirming that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Question though, are you signed in the app and on a telephone?
No, just signed in on the app.
Thank you very much.
Your audio quality is very good.
The advantage of computer audio, I suppose.
Are you ready for your 3 minutes?
Yes, I am.
Just one moment. Your time begins now.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. My name is Matt Joseph. Just for the record, a couple areas to respond to in the discussion that I've heard so far today. I appreciate the thorough discussion. It's an important topic. A couple areas that might be of interest. I recently, through an immediate disclosure request, received an operations manual from the Department of Building Inspection, which describes to their employees how to handle records requests. And so I do think it is interesting, this topic of agencies versus supervisors versus individuals. I think there's nuance here in that, as said previously, a bus driver or someone at a counter may not necessarily be equipped to handle a records request, even an informal one, but part of their job is perhaps to refer that to someone who is, and they go through training and other sorts of education in order to do that. At the end of the day, it might be valuable to explore some of the existing operations manuals to understand how these individuals are trained today to respond to records requests. The names of managers and supervisors are on these operational manuals, in a sense, taking accountability for the instructions provided to the everyday employee. So there might already be some of that sort of agency versus supervisor versus line employee dynamic codified through these operation manuals that would be worth exploring. Another aspect that might be interesting to touch on from earlier, going to the combination of both the details that are being revised here and the sort of headlining aspects, it is important to get both right. One perhaps aspect that would be worth considering is not only the cost to the city and cost to taxpayers, but the cost to folks as they go through the process of requesting records and records request processes in general. As an example that might prove helpful, since the mid-90s, over 100,000 3R reports, the reports that provide history on building permits that are required as part of the disclosure when selling a property in San Francisco, have been generated. Each of those reports costs anywhere from $50 in the 90s through over $200 today, generating the city over $10 million in revenue. In other words, the public has paid over $10 million over the course of the last 30 years for records. Those records are not in the index to records. You can't get them online, and there's no process the public is aware of to request them. So an aspect of this that's important to get right is not only providing the capability to get those records, but in revising at the detail level, there is the headlining feature of saving not only the taxpayer money, but also saving the general public money outside of the taxes paid. And that's all on my end. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
May I? Oh,
Actually,
Phil,
Member
please.
Wolf and then Member Pilko.
Okay.
Unless, is there anyone else wishing to make public comment?
We have no other callers in the queue, no one in the room.
Okay, members of the public, thank you for your great comments. Member Wolf and then Member Pilko.
Yeah, I think Mr. Sullivan had he really had something to go on. 6721-1 is very clear about public records shall be made publicly accessible over the internet. And I think that somehow we need to raise that up. We need to lift that up and amplify it and really make it more accessible. I mean, the city just went through and is still going through a major website overhaul. And a lot, the way it's designed is not very navigatable to a lot of people. It's not very intuitive. And there's a lot of things that are now buried that are kind of difficult to find because some web pages for certain departments and agencies are really sub pages for the overall city website, and they're kind of conflating each other, and it's causing a lot of confusion, which is something I probably would bring up to the website folks anyway. But I think for that matter, being able to find, like some departments, you have to dig pretty deeply, even just to get to like who is on the commission for that department kind of area. It's not like up front and center. So I think, which is not accessible, quote unquote. So I think 6721 deserves some attention. I don't necessarily think it may need some tweaking here and there, but for the most part, I think the sentiment is there for what we want. To the second point, I'd say if somebody asked a question of a bus driver that they thought might have the information, the ordinance allows for oral disclosure of information, and that city staff should not be hiding things that normally would be available to the public. So if I had work being done on my street and it wasn't clear what they were going to do, and I went up to them, for instance, I had a blackout on my block, and there were some folks that were working on the corner, and they had flashlights and whatnot, and I was like, oh, they must have killed the light, so I'm going to go ask them what they're doing and how long it's going to take. I went over to them. They go, no, we're working on city fiber, and we have nothing to do with the electrical system. It's just a coincidence. So, there is ample ability for staffers to be able to provide some level of public information on the spot if you were to ask them. There's no requirement for them to have to go back to a department to get permission or what have you, unless they feel that the information might be classified or somehow a security risk. I'll stop there.
Member Pilpel?
I agree, and I recognize, I think that there's a high level of agreement on some of these points. I think Mr. Sullivan's points I agree with. Mr. Joseph's comments, I think, were very well taken, and I would actually suggest to Mr. Joseph, assuming the DBI manual isn't 100 pages, but if it's 10 or 20 pages, whatever it is, if he could just send that to our task force administrator, I'd be interested in seeing that. If he thinks that, particularly if he thinks it's got elements of a model for other city departments. And I think the point that he made about the 3R reports relates back to what I said earlier about software as a service or other proprietary or non-proprietary systems that have been paid for by permit fees or through the general fund or whatever over many years, and are records. I mean, we're in this sort of weird place where a paper record is very clearly a paper record, but these systems now can generate paper records, are retaining information, but what's in there is or isn't a record and may or may not have to be kept in a certain way for a long time and disposable. And these, permit tracking systems, whether it's DBI or planning or DPW or other departments, have gotten, increasingly complicated, proprietary, and the public has had less access to some of these systems to find out, what's the status of a permit at one of these departments. When instead the language says make it more available, instead it's become somewhat less available. We could have a whole hearing on that. Let's not. And to the point, sorry, I'm not, I'm a big fan of the bus drivers, so it's not like I'm beating up on bus drivers. But my point was, a bus driver, in my view, should focus on safely operating the bus and doing what they need to do in service of their primary work. They should know enough about MTA to know that the head either used to be Jeff Tumlin and now is Julie Kirschbaum, and that their main office is 1 South Van Ness, and maybe the main phone number or the website is sfmta.com. Or if you really have a question, call 311 and they will help you. Those are the kinds of things that I think any city employee should know. But I want the route sheet for the 5R, or, I want, a copy of MTA's budget from 2 years ago, I think is well beyond a reasonable ask of a bus driver. So the more that the department-focused requests can be sent to the department head, the PIO, the counter person that you come to at 1 South Van Ness, et cetera. Those people should know more about the ordinance and where to get information, and the other people should know just a little bit and enough to refer you. That's where I am on it.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that there's radical disagreement about that. Did you want to go through page
No
2
argument
here?
there.
Sorry, Member Wolf?
I said no argument there.
No argument there. Okay.
Did you want to go through page 2? Do you want to do something else?
I'm thinking let's finish this because I feel like we're actually making some good progress here. The next section is very short, referring to public meetings, and I'm just going to read these quickly and see if we have agreement or disagreement. Require all boards and commissions subject to the Sunshine Ordinance to keep minutes. Provide consistent requirements for all public meetings regarding agendas, minutes, and the conduct of meetings. Create a centralized website documenting all upcoming city meetings and agendas. And then then require agenda items to include a proposed action or be identified as for discussion only. And that last one has been a bit controversial in that with the task force, we do identify items that are for discussion only. But I think over the years, there have been requests wanting us to have proposed motions on the agenda, but because of the nature of our work, that often does not make sense.
So, yeah, I think on all of these points, it's kind of where it makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of where it makes sense.
Okay.
Charter boards and commissions are required to keep minutes. Other policy bodies are not. So it may be that we tweak that to say require other policy bodies to keep minutes. And maybe the trade-off is that we emphasize that they're action minutes because there's some bodies that have gone off and done verbatim minutes and transcripts and all kinds of costly things. Yeah, consistency is good. How that plays out may require some tweakage. I'm absolutely in favor of a centralized list of upcoming meetings.
So many people from so many corners have asked for this.
Well, I mean, that's like the
no.
thing
I think it's a good thing too.
We could have done that 25 years ago. We could be doing that now. I'm not sure that it needs to list the entire agenda, but if one said, I want to engage with the city this Wednesday night, what meetings or events are there? One should be able to go to a city website that says, okay, Wednesday night the 14th, this meeting's happening at 6:30. The Board of Appeals, which normally meets in this room on Wednesdays, is not meeting. The Police Commission is not meeting. There's a community meeting in the Mission about fill in the blank. There's some program at the library or whatever that, we're spending all this money doing all these things, and you'd be darned if you can easily find out what's going on. It's maddening.
Yeah, you can make a meeting notice posting and just put a link to the agenda.
Right. Correct. Exactly. All you need is a link to the agenda, but it's got to say what the body is, what time, blah, blah, blah.
So
not too many elements, and it just needs to be updated. So when you send something to the library, either you go in and you add this event to the thing, or the library folks type it in and add it to the list. Somebody should be able to do this. This is not the biggest fix in the world. I don't know that this could be done now. We can add it to the ordinance as a requirement, but they could start doing this tomorrow morning.
Yes, and they could actually scrape the current website because everybody pretty much posts their meetings on their own web page anyway.
Right, but the formats are all over the place, and
yes. I agree.
Some people
so
have.
This gets to the consistency of the and of what elements are required.
Right. For a while, everybody pretty much had a PDF of their agenda that was posted and that you could print out and blah, blah, blah. Now, many are like that, but some just have embedded HTML on the website, and, you don't have a PDF of the agenda. It's like, this is not hard. This stuff is really the easiest stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
Member Wolf.
Yeah, I have a comment on that. So with the first bullet, require all boards and commissions. Now, I think one of the things we've run into at times, and I've experienced this, is many meeting bodies, they're not even sure if they're a policy body or not.
Mm-hmm.
I did a training for the planning department's code enforcement committee.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an advisory committee. It's a big committee. There's a lot of people on it. And when I did my research on it and found out how they were formed, I had them read from the beginning of the ordinance with the definitions. And as I had everybody pick a paragraph and went around the table. And when they got to the point where it was describing what a policy body was, it got to a point where they all started looking at each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were, in fact, a policy body because they were created by the Planning Commission itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that the city does due diligence to inform or be clear about what the body actually is, whether it's a policy body or not, because it has to be defined. It has to be interpreted as to the code, and I think that there should be some requirement that in the description of the meeting body, whether it's a commission or an advisory body or whatever it is, it has it specifically notated as to what it is. Is it a policy body? Is it a passive meeting body? Is it not compliant? Not necessarily compliant with sunshine as far as meeting its requirements, that kind of thing. I think that also rubs people the wrong way, because they'll go to a meeting and then want to get minutes, and they're like, well, we don't have to keep minutes. We're not a policy body. And then you find out later that they are.
I'm just going to jump in here. It would be very interesting if there were almost just like a survey form for every meeting. Name of the entity, when and where it's meeting, the time, a link to the agenda, and then what is it? Maybe even on that same thing, there's a checkbox. Will minutes be available after this meeting? And there's another checkbox. And that could all be tracked on a consistent basis.
Yep.
Yeah. Just 2 points here. We used to engage more with the library's government information center. We could do that again and have whoever's running that and whoever staffs the counter come in and ask them how often they get postings, what they do with them, what they do with them afterwards, if the public is actually looking at the binder, blah, blah, blah. And we can say, for example, when you get something, whether a city staff person walks it in or emails it or faxes it, however you get something, when you put it in the binder, how hard would it be to type up those 4 elements that you just referenced into a database that would be publicly available and searchable, so that people wouldn't necessarily have to come down there to get the thing. But again, they could say, hey, it's Wednesday night, what's happening, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe, and if the library says, yes, we could do that, but we probably would need a part-time person, and that would be another $20,000 a year. And we might say, okay, well, maybe that's worth $20,000 for that benefit, I mean, some of these may be trade-offs, but that's one, that might be cheap and worth doing. Or they may say, yeah, we can probably do that. We may not be able to do it immediately as something gets turned in, but within an hour or two, when there's no traffic at the counter, somebody can do that, whatever, right? If we're going to try to problem solve, we could actually, solve some problems. That would be cool. And there was something else on agendas and minutes. Oh, the training piece. We've got this sort of one-size-fits-all training. The type of training that's appropriate, Member Wolf, for advisory bodies or passive meeting bodies that aren't policy bodies may be different from what a member of a board or commission or department head gets as training. I mean, I'm really into stratifying that training to what you need to know rather than everything about stuff that most of which doesn't apply to you. If there's no conflict of interest issue, then you can probably just brush aside all of that, all of the conflict of interest rules and as part of the training. It's just an advisory body about some particular issue, and that's all they're doing, and they're not a final decision-making body. Then it's more about having a decent agenda and taking some notes and that kind of thing, you know? All right, anyway, I think we're in general agreement on that training piece.
Member Wolf, was there anything else about those 4 bullet points on public meetings that you had thoughts on?
Nope.
Okay.
I think it stands on itself.
Okay. Okay. And as I said, these came from, public discussion. And with that 4th one, well, we can have internal discussion with the current board about exactly what something like that might mean.
Where applicable. If there's a specific contemplated action like a draft resolution or, a contract award or something, I think that's appropriate for the agenda, right? Staff recommendation, award contract for $54 million to so-and-so contractor to, do this project, bang. But if it's, there's an appeal about this address or this case, it's open for discussion and action because it could go any number of different ways.
Right.
And,
Right. Administrator Peterson, let's open up for public comment on this last round of discussion.
The committee is taking intermittent public comment on item 3, review of the administrative code. If you'd like to make public comment, we have no one in the room, so anyone online, if you'd like to make public comment, please raise your hand in the app or press *3. We have Mr. Sullivan.
Okay.
Hello, Mr. Sullivan. Are you ready? Mr. Sullivan, you've been unmuted. Mr. Sullivan, I see you've joined us in the app. I have unmuted you. Give you just a moment. Mr. Sullivan, I'll return to you. We have Mr. Matt Joseph.
No audio.
Hello, Mr. Joseph, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, your 3 minutes begins now.
Just a very brief comment. An aspect around the creating a centralized website, definitely very interested. While I personally have the technical background to either peruse or scrape or pull different websites or pages, it is particularly challenging. There's always something that someone misses. Something to perhaps consider as well is that sort of in common parlance, there's a difference between polling for information rather than having information pushed to you. Members of the public are often very used to being pushed information with so many phone notifications these days. They often, in many cases, assume they don't have to go poll for things, go visit a site or go choose to download an agenda, be that in HTML format or PDF format. It would be interesting to explore something that perhaps has been discussed in other task force forums before, but if there is a way to receive through a single mailing list or other form of a feed, a fire hose, so to speak, of upcoming agendas, meetings, and put the onus on the city instead to push out that information, similar to sending letters or posting notices, rather than relying on members of the public to go and find it somewhere else. If it were as easy as signing up for a text or signing up for a mailing list, as we've all obviously done before, that might be an interesting avenue to explore as well as a way to do central information. Obviously not replacing, but perhaps building on top of a website. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll return to Mr. Sullivan, and then we do have another caller.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, we're checking in once again. Can you hear us? We see that your hand is raised. I'll give you just a moment. Okay, Mr. Sullivan, I'm going to mute you. We're going to our other caller, and we will we'll return to you. Hello, caller. Hello, caller. Do you
Hello,
wish to...
Oh, great.
Is this Mr. Sullivan?
this is Mr. Sullivan. Yeah, I
Just so
jumped
you know-
back to the phone.
Your time begins now.
Okay. The one thing, I jumped back to the phone because I couldn't get the app. You guys weren't hearing me. But the one part of the internet that works for the city is Data SF, Open Data, sf.org. Basic rate things. So they have a newsletter. I'm looking right now. I mean, it's not just data. There's Ethics Commission enforcement summaries database. So I tried to, in my argument in 2022, as far as policy regarding use of purchase of computer systems and my thing against the internet, I wanted to really, the city to ditch the net request because it has a lot of limitations and use something more like open data where it is actually searchable. And they can scrape and they're pretty good at what they do. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I have kind of a hard stop in about 10 minutes.
Okay, let's, okay, that gives us a few more minutes then. Let's look at, okay, members, would you like to look at the next couple of items, or would you rather save that for our next meeting and go back to some high level sort of points?
Yes. Why don't we
Draw the line here.
cut it there for the moment,
Okay.
noting that we were doing this. We're still going to do 67.26
And
another
we made
day.
progress, yes.
Yes, progress was made.
Mhm.
Would we figure out where we're at now? I think, Chair LaHood, you were not going to be at the full task force meeting in June. Is that correct?
That is correct. I will be out of town.
Okay. Could we maybe quickly frame at least a couple of things that Member Wolf and I could perhaps present and see if we can engage the other members and get something resembling comments, direction on the thorny stuff? The simple stuff that we generally agree on, I'm less concerned about that. It's the harder stuff, again, whether it's IDR, supervisor record, pick your thing, but if we can just start to get some engagement at that level, that would be good.
Okay. And I can type these up because I've been taking a lot of notes. Did you say you think IDRs are simple or not simple?
Not simple in terms of, do we want to change the timing, the structure, the who they go to, all of that,
Right.
you know? If everyone thinks IDRs are working fine and there's no need to change anything,
Thinks IDRs are
there you go. There you go. So how you frame the question
right.
is pretty critical.
Okay. How about this? What if we go to the task force and say, we could leave it open-ended. How would you like to change the IDR process? And then I could go back through and pull some of the recommendations that were made here and some of the ones that were made inside the document already from our previous discussions. Does that make sense?
It does. I think we have more lengthy open-ended discussions here. We tend to do that at the full task force as well. But I think to the extent that we brought, a few bullet points, and said, for item 1, IDRs, we could do A, B, or C, or something, closer to C with variations, right?
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, how should we modify the IDR process? Suggestions.
Correct.
I'm going to pull
Yes.
from our discussion here and from the previous annotations through the ordinance. Member Wolf, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I'm open to having more discussion about IDR.
Okay.
And I don't care if that's one of them, but I'm just saying if we could pick 2 or 3 of those
Right.
things and have a brief discussion and get them in the mode of, okay, hit me with the thing.
Okay, then I'm gonna pull ones that I think are going to require discussion and where we do seem to have, if not consensus, like moving in that direction. So I would also say enforcement. I think talking about the enforcement one, which is going to be thorny, but maybe we could at least get the task force to narrow the, like, these are the venues where we
range.
think
Yeah.
enforcement is likely to be most effective. Member Wolf, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
And enforcement, I would suggest includes enforcing orders, referrals, and training.
Okay.
You know, could include fines, penalties, and termination, but let's start with the other things. If they say, yep, those are useful tools, and the ways to do that are fill in the blank.
Okay. Okay. And then I do think the question that has come up several times about the supervisor of records, which we've had robust discussions on before. I think we have enough information on that that I can, again, pull together. I think you guys could have a good conversation on that. Member Wolf, would you agree that that would be a good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
These are neither the smallest nor the biggest, but these are things all of which warrant discussion.
Okay.
We'll get
And
to
then
other things.
and then I'm going to throw in there, because I feel like it's somewhat related, Member Wolf's request for clarification on what is an authorized representative. Although, does that,
Yeah,
is that sort of a micro thing under the enforcement?
I think that that's more micro and technical. I have no problem saying that whenever departments send somebody that they should be both authorized and knowledgeable, period. And I think we could tweak that language, but I think there's general agreement on the concept that, you know, just sending somebody who doesn't know, who's brand new, doesn't know the case, doesn't know the issues, doesn't know anything, isn't particularly helpful.
So that might be more just clarifying the language in the ordinance. Okay.
Member Wolf, did you disagree with any of that?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay. Member Pilpel, I'm still not sure that I fully understood your point where you said handling of complaints by the task force for both meetings and records. Like, I'm not sure what.
Oh,
I'm not sure what you're asking for.
sorry, that 21E suggests a whole process, supervisor records, task force, et cetera, as to complaints related to records. There's no easy parallel. There's vague language in 30C about complaints related to meetings.
Ah, okay.
So part of where I was going structurally was to take all that 21E language and move it to Article 4 and say the task force shall have a process to handle complaints, but that it's both meeting and record related. And so all that stuff about it being specific to records, I would broaden that. So if you've got a complaint about how a meeting was handled, that the task force should address that in the same way, but I don't want to leave that in Article
Right.
3. I wanted to move
call
that to Article
a
4.
technical language edit, so I don't know that that one necessarily.
Right, that's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
it may not be, but it's good there for the moment.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of controversy
Yeah.
about that. Anyway.
Getting back to the, where we did spend a lot of time talking about retention policies, and maybe what we should ask is, to what degree, in fact, I think I did write that down. I even bolded it somewhere.
Records
If I did-
management.
Yeah,
But-
let's say, what should the task force role be in, should the task force have a role in records management?
And if so, whatever, yes, with a variety of, a range of options there.
Should the ordinance have a role in records management?
Okay,
That,
Not the task force.
okay. I'm gonna say records management and retention policies.
sure.
And if not the ordinance, then what about the charter?
Okay. Okay.
Well, it's already addressed elsewhere in ordinance in chapter 8. So, the question, one way to look at it is, should it just stay in chapter 8? Should all of that be moved to chapter 67, et cetera? Do you try to harmonize? Do you insert us elsewhere in chapter 8, just like we've got a small role in 12L, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure that we need to suggest a charter amendment just on that area any more so than any of the rest of this.
Okay.
I guess part of what I'm saying is I'm not yet ready to broach a charter amendment on any of this. I think this is all at the level of ordinance, but Member Wolf makes an excellent point that the language in Sunshine that says that this trumps other provisions elsewhere in ordinance is important and is not to be found in chapter 8.
Okay. And then question, would you say, the question about having a role in records management and retention policies, is that separate from we think that records identified in the index of records should by default be posted online? Like, are we saying that that's a different thing, or is that part of the same discussion or a different piece?
Well, I think reading
Yes and no.
671-1 really, it's quite explicit there. What I think the sentiment is, it's really more than just the index of records.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that we're yet at a point of either teasing out or merging those concepts in the index. Maybe you want to make a note of this on the index of records, electronic records, the 21-1, and what goes on the internet, the 29-2. I don't think we're in disagreement, but I don't know that we've harmonized those concepts yet.
Okay.
Remember,
So
Wolf,
maybe
does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry. I have to run.
Okay. Can we take quick public comment on this before you go? Because I think we have to.
Okay.
Public comment on.
Administrator Peterson's microphone went out. She's asking for public comment. Okay, we've got another microphone. Anyone wishing to make public comment on the last part of the discussion, please identify yourself and Administrator Peterson will call you.
Well, I can see there's a call-in user.
One moment. One moment, please. I'm muting.
I can hear you now.
I'm sorry, you can hear me?
Can, yes.
Yes, I can.
Thank
Yes.
you. Hello, caller, with your hand raised. You've been unmuted. Would you like to make public comment? This is item 3.
Yeah, this is Sullivan. And my public comment is that, I don't know, it's been a while since I've looked at an index of records, but it's basically useless. I mean, it's very general. That's all I'll say. Bye.
Thank you. We have no other hands raised.
Okay. Then Ms. Peterson, if you could please call the next item.
So ultimately, no action taken on item
No
3, but continued discussion.
Yeah, to the call of the chair, I will be writing up a summary and sharing it with Chair Yankee so that you may have a discussion at the June meeting, even though I won't be there.
And Member Wolf and I will
We'll wrap.
attempt to facilitate
love
that.
it.
Okay, great, good.
No action taken on item 3. Item 4, announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items by members of the Compliance and Amendments Committee.
I'm stepping out. Sorry, folks.
Okay, thank you.
Noting
Uh,
Member Wolf,
You'll still have quorum.
No, we don't.
won't.
We
You
need to
don't?
end the meeting.
Why? You have
We
2
don't
out
have
of
quorum.
3. You have 2 out of 3.
No.
No, we have 4 people on the committee.
Member Anderson has been absent today.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll wait a moment.
I have nothing to add.
I'll hold my stuff to the future.
okay, taking public comment. Chair LaHood?
I mean, we didn't add anything, so you
Let's
can't,
just add.
let's just ask just in case.
Yeah.
Taking public comment on item 4. I see one hand raised. Let me confirm that this is for item 4. Hello, caller. Did you wish to make public comment on item 4, announcements, comments, and questions?
No, you didn't clear the hands.
Perfect. Thank you very much for clarifying. Lowering your hand now.
And thanks to both members of the public for their contributions.
Insightful comments.
Yes.
We have no other hands raised. And
Okay.
no one in the room.
Next item, please.
Item number 5, adjournment.
Without objection.
So moved. Thank you.
The meeting is adjourned at 6:55 p.m.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Member Wolf.
Microphones are going off.